Since 2015, Jared Stillman has rocked Nashville sports.
That team freaking stinks.
And now he's back. The takes are hotter than ever.
I mean, let's be honest, he just can't coach.
Welcome to Stillman and Company.
Stillman and Company on the 440 Sports Network here on YouTube at Stillman and Co. Hope everybody's having a great day. By the way, congratulations to us as we have hit the 3,000 subscriber mark on YouTube on the Stillman and Co. YouTube page. And let me just say with that, hell yes. And yesterday was our most downloaded podcast day since we started doing this a month ago, which I actually expected because I figured that there would be a lot of downloading yesterday for the post press conference podcast that we did on Monday night. And apparently there was. And I actually had a podcast company reach out to me. They're more of a video podcast company, but they reached out to me and I talked to them at the beginning of all of this when I was figuring out where I was going to go. And 440 Sports is our proud distributor. We're glad to work for 440 Sports. But I had somebody that I had talked to reached out to me and said, hey, what about the video rights? They'd like to buy the video rights here. They want me to join their YouTube network. And I'm like, we'll have to talk about it, but still Billy Nation has spoken, and I feel very, very thankful for them. And I like what we're doing, and I like the way we're doing because it's been fun. And while I hate the fact that some of our biggest successes have come from the coach getting fired, this is, in fact, the world we live in. So thank you to all of you out there that have subscribed, to everybody that likes, that comments, whatever it may be. Thank you. I have been working my ass off as far as building this is concerned, and I actually really enjoy it. So I want to start with this. This morning, I woke up and saw an article from CBS Sports, their top NFL insider, Jonathan Jones. And I didn't know what I was expecting. Everybody now has a story to tell about the Titans after they fire the coach. And he's no different, but I clicked on it because I was just looking to see, okay, we had Albert Breer on yesterday. We talked to him. He's done a lot of great reporting on the Titans. Let's see what Jonathan Jones, has to say about what happened with the Titans, what he's hearing, so on and so forth. And a lot of the stuff I already knew, but I was surprised by some of the details that JJ had in his piece. And again, I already knew stuff like, one source said that the coach was an offensive coordinator and we needed a head coach. I already knew that. That's not anything crazy for me. But then there were these three little nuggets in the piece that absolutely stood out to me. And I think all three are very important. The first was about their search that led them to Brian Callahan. Quote, the Titans Brain Trust had interest in several candidates in 2024 when Callahan emerged as a pick. Then Ravens defensive coordinator Mike McDonald put on a strong initial interview, but wasn't chosen. Then Cowboys defensive coordinator Dan Quinn interviewed with the team virtually, but did not make the second round. Quinn was just days removed from giving up 48 points at home to the Packers in the divisional round, and sources say Strunk couldn't shake the stink of that, plus the image of the 28-3 Super Bowl collapse when Quinn was the head coach of the Falcons. Are you fucking serious? I read that. I thought to myself, oh my God. And here's why. Again, that reads to me as Amy liked Dan Quinn, but he gave up 48 points in a playoff game. So she was like, you know what? Everything else, forget about it. And the Super Bowl, he's not good enough. That is how fans think. And that is why this organization is such an unrelenting shit show. Because the owner acts like an irrational fan. The owner has to be above the way fans act. That is, if you want to be good. The owner has information and is privy to stuff we're not, and they need to use it. The owner can sit down with every single person in the building and tell them whatever they want. And not this owner. She's not even around all the time. But man, she watched that Cowboy game on Fox and said, you know what? No, thank you on Dan Quinn. Again, that's how a fan thinks. A fan says on Monday after Callahan got fired, you know who we should hire? We should hire Joe Brady to be our offensive coordinator. Why? What do you know about Joe Brady? Well, the Bills score a lot of points on offense. Then watches the game on Monday night. The Bills' offense doesn't look good. I don't want Joe Brady anymore. That's how a fan thinks. I mean, a lot of people gave the Colts owner a bunch of shit because she wore a headset and she's like, I'm making $1 million decisions. I need to know who does what, who said what. And I don't have a problem with that. That's being informed. I was thinking about hiring him, but then the defense gave up 48 points. Well, didn't Dak throw a pick six? So take that away from Dan Quinn. That's not his fault. Again, you can have a bad performance for a myriad of reasons that are not the fact that the coordinator is the issue, but also you're not hiring Dan Quinn to coordinate your defense. You're hiring Dan Quinn to be the head coach of your football team. And if there were other reasons, and they say that Dan Quinn didn't have the strongest plan for the coaching staff on the offensive side of the ball, and if that's the case, fine, that's a reason not to hire somebody. But because Amy Adams Strunk couldn't shake the stink of the 48 points they gave up at home to the Packers in the divisional round, plus the Super Bowl collapse from 8 years ago, she's, no thank you on Dan Quinn. What? Well, I was watching the game on TV and he had a backwards cap on. I can't do it. What? Give me a better reason than that. And again, that's how a fan thinks. And that's why this team sucks so bad, because Amy runs this organization based off of how the fans feel. Again, when John Robinson got fired, there were a lot of fans who were like, yeah. And anybody who knows football was sitting there saying, wait a minute. This is a good general manager. This is a guy who wins. This is a guy who goes to the playoffs. This is a guy who took your organization for the what? But the fans are like, he missed on 3 picks and traded A.J. Brown. He sucks. Way to go, Amy. Way to tank the Jacksonville game. Way to ruin the season. Way to do. Yes. By the way, Amy was a part of the A.J. Brown trade. Amy was in favor of the A.J. Brown trade. And Amy was even, according to my sources, still on board with the decision to trade A.J. after it blew up. After we said, oh, that's a bad trade, Amy was like, I'm still glad we made it, from what I've been told. So she fired her winning general manager, who took the worst team in football, made them a contender because he missed on 2 picks, Wilson and Farley. Again, that's how an idiot thinks. And that's how a lot of the fans think. So when I read that, again, in the Jonathan Jones article, I'm like, oh my God. Imagine being so stupid that you decide to either hire a head coach in the NFL or not hire a head coach in the NFL because of how his side of the ball played in one playoff game. I guess Amy Adams Strunk would fire Andy Reid or not want him because they only scored 22 points in the Super Bowl and they didn't do anything in that first half. He must suck. And again, I understand the playoffs are the biggest stage and everything else. And when somebody goes out there and acts like an idiot in a playoff game, and it proves that they don't know what they're doing, like Dan Campbell going for it 15 times in the NFC title game, that's one thing. But when you just get your ass beat, that could have happened for a myriad of reasons. And to pin it on the defensive coordinator, again, is something a fan would do, which I couldn't believe. Kyle Kyle Shanahan blew leads in the Super Bowl, and I'd still say he's a pretty good coach. So that was the first nugget, again, that I read that I'm like, oh my God. I would just say, hey, we interviewed Dan Quinn. We like Dan Quinn. His offensive plan for the offensive side of the ball wasn't very good. I would not say, well, I watched that game against the Packers and they scored too many points. So I said, no, thank you. Nugget number 2 in the Jonathan Jones CBS article, quote, one of the top names in coaching searches this season will be Bills offensive coordinator Joe Brady, who pulled himself out of the running for jobs last year to stay with Buffalo. Did he pull himself out of the running for jobs, or did nobody want to hire him? Because that happens a lot where it's like, well, I'd rather be a coordinator this year. Well, that's because everybody else doesn't want to hire you? Yeah. It's early, but sources doubt, JJ writes, it's early, but sources doubt the Titans would go with a 30-something offensive coordinator with no head coaching experience after firing Callahan, even if Brady has successfully called plays when Callahan did not as an OC. And again, I go back to, this is what fans do. The translation of that is they are going to do the exact same they did last time, which is hire the exact opposite of what they just fired. And I am not a Joe Brady fan per se. I don't really know him from a jar of Vicks, but I'm not one of these people up here saying, they got to hire Joe Brady. He's so good. Joe Brady this, Joe Brady that. That's not me. But can I ask a simple question of the next coaching search of the Titans? How about you just hire the best coach who shares a similar vision with whomever it is in your organization that picks the players? Is that too much to ask for? I don't care if the next head coach of the Tennessee Titans coaches the offensive side of the ball, the defensive side of the ball, or special teams. I don't care if the next head coach of the Titans is black, white, Hispanic, Asian, whatever. I don't even care if it's a woman who coaches the Titans. I want the next coach of the Titans to be a good leader who understands the game, who has the humility to be able to adapt, who has a good working relationship with the general manager, who understands the dynamics between the person picking the players and the one coaching them, and who is respectful of the fan base. Go hire the best person. Every coach is going to have strengths and every coach is going to have weaknesses. And it's the thing about Mike Vrabel that drives me crazy is there's this weird belief when it comes to Mike Vrabel that, well, he's just so darn good. He's good, but he's got his weaknesses. That's going to happen with any of these candidates. But what the Titans did was they looked at Mike Vrabel and they said, we want everything that he's not. We want somebody who's agreeable. We want somebody who coaches the offensive side of the ball. We want somebody who will, be good to the media. We want somebody who, and that's how you ended up with Brian Callahan. And it's not the Brian Callahan profile. Offensive coordinator, didn't call plays. It's not the profile that sunk Callahan. It is the fact that Callahan wasn't a good coach. The fact that he doesn't hold other people accountable very well. That was the issue. Not, well, he never called plays before, so, neither did Kevin O'Connell. And every time I watch a Kevin O'Connell game, all the announcers do is get on their knees and give him a blowjob about how freaking great of a coach he is. He never called plays. So give me a break on that front. Again, I don't think they'll hire Joe Brady because they hired Callahan and it didn't work. So we're just not going to do any of the things they did. And number 3, my favorite nugget in this piece. Quote, as one source familiar with Strunk put it when asked what the most important aspect of this coaching search will be, quote, Amy doesn't want to get scolded in the media, end quote. Hey, what's really, really important about this next head coaching hire to you, Amy? Well, it's really important that I don't get scolded in the media. Oh, my God. I do like the wording there when it says one source familiar with Strunk. So it didn't say one source inside the team. It didn't say one source. This is a source familiar with Strunk, which makes me think it's somebody who used to work for the Titans, but I don't know. Again, Amy doesn't want to get scolded in the media. Can I read that again? Quote, as one source familiar with Strunk put it when asked what the most important aspect of this coaching search will be, quote, Amy doesn't want to get scolded in the media. Oh, my God. Again, I don't have any faith they're going to get this right. I don't even have faith that if they were to hire the right coach, that it would work out because I think the organization is so fucked up. But the fact that Amy doesn't want to get scolded in the media is part of this test is everything that is wrong with this situation. Do you remember the Eagles in between their 2 Super Bowl appearances? Remember, both Jonathan Gannon, the defensive coordinator, and Shane Steichen, the offensive coordinator, got head coaching jobs. And so Nick Sirianni replaced each guy. And I think he swung and missed on both. Sean Desai, the defensive coordinator, Brian Johnson, the offensive coordinator, and they both were bad. And it was a train wreck of a season, and A.J. Brown was bitching, and they went to Tampa in the wild card round and got absolutely housed. And Sirianni was on the hot seat. And I remember listening to Philly radio, and I thought if they didn't fire that coach, somebody was going to get murdered. That somebody in Philadelphia, I've only been there a handful of times. I assume Philadelphia is a very dangerous place, though I could be wrong about that. But I just assumed that if they didn't change a coach, somebody was going to get murdered. And guess what? Jeffrey Lurie didn't kowtow to what the media said. And I'm sure they ripped him. And Howie Roseman didn't kowtow to the media. And I'm sure they ripped him. And so it doesn't matter. If they think he's a good coach and they think his plan for next season is good, they know what they're doing. They don't give a shit about what somebody on WIP in Philadelphia says. But not Amy. And when it comes to scoldings in Nashville, I'd like to think that I might be the best scolder in town, up there with PK. So if Amy doesn't want to get scolded in the media while Amy is just getting freaking raked over the coals, both nationally and locally, can I give a scolding or advice on maybe how to avoid some scoldings? I'm going to look right in the camera. Amy, get rid of Chad Brinker. This guy might be the smartest guy in the history of the NFL. I kind of doubt it, but he might be. But nothing good has happened since Chad Brinker has been with the Titans, and he has been promoted twice. He said 2 years ago his job was to help out Brian Callahan and help out Rand Carthon and build that vision. And, yeah, he helped. It's okay to admit you bought the bullshit. There are a lot of really smart people who bought Bertie Madoff. It's fine. But if scolding Amy is what she wishes to avoid and scolding Amy is what gets changed, number one, that's really sad. And number two, it's clearly true. Number three, I implore everybody in the media to tell Amy to get rid of Chad Brinker and start running this operation like a regular football team. You have a regular general manager who seems to be qualified enough to be a general manager. Let him pick the players. Let him pick the coach. Let him do all the interviews. Let him run the team. You want to fire the coach? Let him be the one that has his name on the email. Instead of Chad Brinker. Again, that back and forth between Chad and TD, I cannot get over this about who's picking the coach. This was Monday night during the press conference, and just listen to this back and forth between Chad and TD.
Not the interim, but the head coach, actually, not permanently, but going forward once the season's over.
Yeah, I think, like I said, Mike and I have been, a big part of all those conversations with Amy. I don't know if I'm understanding your question correctly, but
basically what I'm asking is it going to be your decision, Amy's decision? Whose decision is it going to be to hire the next head coach for
I got you. Yeah, we're all going to work on that together. But Mike and I will lead if you're asking, as far as the search is concerned, Mike and I will lead that search. But right now, what our focus is right now is pouring everything we can into Mike McCoy.
I mean, it's amazing. He's sitting there like, I'm not sure TD's like, so who's going to pick the coach? I'm not sure I understand your question. What? Again, let's run it like a football team where we don't even have to ask those questions. Who's picking the coach? He is. He's the general manager. Not around here. So that's the first thing. Again, that Jonathan Jones article, that thing is just chock full of, and there's a lot of other stuff in there, like basic stuff that if you didn't follow the Titans, you'd be picking up on. But for me, Amy decided not to hire Dan Quinn because the Cowboys got their ass kicked in a playoff game. That's awesome. That like anybody can own a football team. It's like the Seinfeld bit I did a couple weeks ago. You have to be qualified to sell a beer in the stadium, but not to own it. Let's talk about Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. I love Hiller. They take great care of my home. They can do the exact same for you. Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. They have been in business since 1990, and they are family-owned and operated. Hiller, 100% satisfaction. Of happy you'll be here. The service is free, and I know this because I use Hiller at my home. If a customer is not pleased with the work that is performed, my guys at Hiller will make it right. And trust me, they do adhere to that at all times, because the best thing for them is for people to tell their friends, yeah, I used Hiller, and it was incredible. And I do use Hiller, and it is incredible. So learn more at happyhiller.com. Professional, experienced, trustworthy technicians that will come into your home and leave it clean and better than they found it. That's Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Proud supporters of the Nashville Predators, the Vanderbilt Commodores, and the Tennessee Volunteers. That's Hiller. Call the Happy Face Truck today. So John Middlekauff from the Volume is going to join us here in just a little bit. Really good guy, really good football guy. Number two. So I ran a poll on Twitter today about, would you approve Arthur Smith as the next head coach of the Tennessee Titans? And I'm trying not to lock myself into Arthur this, Arthur that, because Matt Nagy's a very qualified candidate. And Mike McCarthy, even though I'm not the biggest Mike McCarthy fan in the world, I think he's kind of a bozo, but that's okay. But Mike McCarthy's a qualified candidate. And there's probably a coordinator out there that I don't know or am not thinking of who might be a very qualified candidate. You never really know who is a great coach. Even though people on TV will tell you who's a great coach and people will, you never really know. But I really, really, really like Arthur Smith. And I said yesterday, the biggest thing with Arthur Smith is I know Arthur Smith's a good coach. Arthur Smith was good here. He was good in Pittsburgh. And most importantly, not that Amy knows him, but that he knows Amy. That he understands the dynamics of how things work when it comes to the Tennessee Titans. A very unique situation as far as the NFL is concerned. So I asked the question, would you approve as Arthur Smith as the next Titans head coach? And as of noon today, 46% of you say yes, 40% say no, and 14% say they have no opinion when it comes to Arthur Smith as the next head coach of the Tennessee Titans. And I'm not saying would Arthur be your first choice. I'm saying, would you approve? And I have no idea of knowing who's a good coach or not, because it's not like the resources the owners in the league have to figure out who's good. We don't have that. Again, Amy's sitting there watching TV to figure out whether or not Dan Quinn's a coach, and she sees that Troy Aikman or Tom Brady on the Fox broadcast, like, well, he could have pulled that guard there. And she's like, oh, no, I saw it on TV. She can pick up the phone, and she can call Arthur Blank, and she can say, hey, tell me about Dan Quinn when he was your coach. Tell me about Arthur Smith when he was your head coach. So I don't have the resources that a coach or a general manager or an owner would have when it comes to doing research on these guys. So I don't know, what happened with Arthur's tenure in Atlanta. And I think that's very important to note, because what happened in Atlanta is very important to me. as I put that poll out on Twitter, there was kind of one refrain that I kept hearing from people. And that was, well, Arthur's a good offensive coordinator, but I'm not sure he's a good head coach. Well, number one, isn't that the case with everybody? Who's out there that you know is a good head coach? Who could the Titans hire today that there isn't something you can say about them that would question whether or not it'll work out? I don't think there's a single guy on the market who doesn't have something in their past where it's like, well, can we really do that? Because, you know, he was the defensive coordinator in Seattle and got fired 15 years ago. I mean, Belichick has 6 Super Bowls, and I'm not sold on him as a coach. But can somebody actually give me a reason that would knock Arthur Smith as a candidate for this job? Talk to anybody who knows him here that worked with him in the organization. They swear by him. Now, I know Burke Nihill and Chad Brinker have fired most of those people, but Arthur Smith has a very strong reputation. And a lot of people will say, well, he's not a good head coach because of what happened in Atlanta when the Falcons went 7-10 3 years in a row. And that's fair. That's his resume. That's what I was talking about with Mike Borgonzi sitting up there at the podium looking like he knows he shouldn't have taken this job, because no matter what the circumstances are here, all anybody will ever remember is whether or not Mike Borgonzi won a Super Bowl or didn't as general manager of the Titans. It's very unfair. But we don't know anything about that 7-10 Falcons team, do we? You guys tell me something. If there's something about that Falcons team that I don't know, that you do know, you tell me. But we had Albert Breer on the show yesterday from the Monday Morning Quarterback, and I asked Albert, I said, what happened with Arthur in Atlanta? Here's what Albert said on our show yesterday.
As for what happened in Atlanta, I think the biggest thing to me, they did a good job of building up the roster. And if you watch them last night, like, you see a lot of the guys that Arthur brought in and playing pivotal roles there, right? I would say the biggest problem was that first year they hung on to Matt Ryan, right? And they were trying to win in that first year. And then it was like, okay, we're going to reset. And then they passed on quarterbacks in 2 years. When you look at it and you see those weren't very good years to be drafting quarterbacks, right?
Yep.
So like he was actually right. You know, in 2022, they didn't draft a quarterback. That was the Kenny Pickett year. In 23, they didn't draft a quarterback. Well, they had no access to Bryce Young or CJ Stroud. And then what are they going to do? Trade up for Anthony Richardson? That wouldn't have worked either. And he was given like the green light by the organization. And this is, I don't know how much has been out there, but he was given the green light by the organization. Hey, like, we sign off on you being patient at quarterback. And then it wound up being what cost him his job, you know? And so he was trying to be patient and build up the roster. And the whole plan was, we're going to be a fully formed team. We're going to tread water at quarterback and be a fully formed team when we put the young quarterback in. And unfortunately, he wound up running out of time because, again, it was one of these situations where the owner got a little bit impatient and didn't like some of the things that were coming back to him. And, you know, X leads to Y, leads to Z, and now all of a sudden the conditions under which you were building, which were, you know, you don't need to sell out for a quarterback right now, came back to bite him.
Okay, so Bert Breer says Arthur was told one thing about the direction of the organization, and then another thing happened. Well, isn't that kind of a big deal? Hey, Arthur, we are going to be very patient because we had to tear this down with Julio and Matt Ryan, and we're going to build it up. And so we're going to be very, very patient, and let's go that. Well, we're 7-10. See ya. Oh, wow. Another impulsive owner. If I owned the Titans, Arthur Smith would 100% get an interview. And there would be extensive work done on his background in Atlanta. You don't have to do a lot of work on his background in general. You know him. He got his start in this organization. He worked his way up both sides of the ball. Talk to Dave McGinnis, who was on the coaching staff when Arthur got his start on the defensive side of the ball. You saw Arthur as the OC here. He was a very good offensive coordinator. You listen to the players talk about the respect they have for Arthur Smith. Delaney Walker. And I remember Delaney Walker. I did a sit down with Delaney at the NFL draft when it was here in Nashville. We did it on behalf of Tostitos. It was a Q&A followed by a nacho making competition between Delaney Walker and some random fan. And we were talking about Arthur Smith, the new offensive coordinator, and Delaney, who was a tight end, had played under Arthur Smith, who was the tight ends coach. And Delaney said, when they found out that he was Fred Smith's son, they talked, man, you're like a billionaire. And apparently he looked right at him and said, that's not my money. And that Delaney Walker really respected that. I know Arthur had the respect of the players here. The respect to Tannehill, the respect to Henry, the respect to all those guys. So, again, I would want to do extensive work about what happened in Atlanta. What was the deal with Desmond Ridder? Why they didn't have a better backup quarterback behind Desmond Ridder when it was clear he couldn't play, the same way the Titans should have had a better backup quarterback behind Will Levis so that when it was clear he couldn't play, you could pivot. But I got to say, everybody that I know that knows Arthur says good things about him. He was very good here. He's been good in Pittsburgh with quarterbacks who cannot throw the ball anywhere else. Think about this. Russell Wilson stinks. Fields stinks. Last year, Aaron Rodgers actually had decent stats, but they stunk. And Arthur's winning games with those guys at quarterback. He's a stand-up guy, and I feel like he's done a really good job in Pittsburgh. Does that mean that I know Arthur Smith will be a good head coach of the Titans? Of course not. But I need a good argument other than, well, he didn't win in Atlanta, because there are a lot of people who haven't won in Atlanta. And the guys who did win in Atlanta, the Thomas Dimitrovs and the Dan Quinns, you don't want them either, apparently. And the one thing I do know about Arthur Smith, if Arthur Smith were to become the coach of the Titans, I know he wouldn't be a disaster, unlike what you're dealing with now. So again, take a look at the coaching board. Arthur Smith is up there. Matt Nagy, I don't know Matt Nagy. Mike McCarthy, I don't know Mike McCarthy. I'd bring him in for interviews. I mean, there's a chance. Jeff Hafley, the defensive coordinator in Green Bay, I don't know anything about Jeff Hafley other than the fact that he was the head coach at Boston College and now he's the DC in Green Bay. Maybe he's great. I don't know. As an owner, I would be wanting to make sure that everybody knew, hey, I'm willing to be open on this stuff. And with that, I'm very excited. Joined now by John Middlekauff from The Volume. He hosts the 3 and Out podcast. He's a former NFL scout. And he was a part of a crew at the Super Bowl last year with Caroline and I, where we met, and about 5 minutes later, we ended up at the Shannon Sharp party. It was a night I'll never forget of me wearing Walmart clothes into the Shannon Sharp party. John Middlekauff joins us. John, I saw your ass ripping of the Tennessee Titans, and I have to say, I think a lot of people around the country are starting to realize this is a really, really poorly run organization. And yet, a lot of fans here think Brian Callahan had to go anyway. So what's your take on he wasn't doing a good job, but they're still a train wreck?
Well, I think when you find yourself in situations like this, and when I first got into this business, I was doing radio and I was around the Raiders. And that was early Mark Davis tenure. And he was trying to do the right thing, but it was just constant people getting fired, GMs, obviously coaches. And you have absolutely no chance against, the top NFL teams whose stability is what they hang their hat on, right? And I think when you hire Brian Callahan, are the reports true that he was making $3 million a year?
I don't know if that's true or not. That probably sounds about ballpark.
So he's not making very much relative to college coaches, let alone he's the lowest paid NFL. Chip Kelly makes $6 million a year. Now, I kind of think Chip Kelly's a scam artist, but still, that's A lot of these defensive coordinators are making $5-6 million a year. So if you're paying your coach that, to me, it shows you what you value the guy, right? Because like major league managers make $750K. Well, they have no juice. They have no value to the franchise. So Brian Callahan, to me, was viewed by the organization as a widget more than, Sean Payton or Andy Reid or Kyle Shanahan. Not even about like they're making a ton of money, but they're the boss and everyone answers them. That's not Brian Callahan. I didn't have that juice. You know better than me, but I'm always fascinated. You do this long enough and working in it and, inside the business and now talking about it, you can glean a lot from a press conference. And you know better than me. And I don't know Chad Brinker. I know a lot of people that know Borgonzi and really like him. I mean, he was very well thought of, high level guy, high character guy. I mean, people I know swear by the guy. Know nothing about Chad Brinker. But Chad Brinker kind of had a football background and then kind of moved his way to more of the business background. But kind of like a Kevin Warren, still opens up the press conferences in the big moments. And I think the first question, right, of the press conference, like, where's Amy? And it's like, well, the owners know where this guy's kind of, running point on all the big football thing. It almost has a Packer feel with Murphy forever and now Ed Policy. But this is not a community-owned organization. This is owned by a family, right? But this guy's now running it. But the football guy, the quote-unquote GM, doesn't speak first. So, it's easy to shit on Brian Callahan, and I'd be lying if I watched a lot of you guys' snaps this year. Clearly not knowing the rules. I watched a little bit of the Raider game. They were really tough watch. They were really bad. And it's one thing when it's Will Levis. It's another thing when you draft this kid number 1 overall. And I know, I think you like Jackson Dart. We can argue how good the guy is, but clearly, like, he should be a major upgrade over Levis, and the team looks awful. But to me, the dynamics in the organization are just, I got that. I have a giant red flag on that. When the Chad Brinker guy talks before the GM, the owner's not there, but clearly has a lot of juice telling this guy to fight. She's very emotional. That's hard to overcome, man. And I think we're going to see from Penn State to Florida to some of these NFL jobs. Look at the list, like who's coaching your team. Like, it's not like there's a great list. There's not a bunch of Kyle Shanahan, Andy Reid, and Sean McVay's sitting out there to go hire. And if there are, why would they come to this beside Nashville is one of my favorite cities in America?
I think it's interesting you bring up the Brinker element of this because Chad Brinker was hired to be Rand Carthon's assistant general manager to run the analytics department with the Titans. And somehow along the way, when Vrabel got fired and Callahan got hired, Chad Brinker got promoted to president of football operations. And at the time, they made it look like Rand Carthon's the GM. He's in charge of football. But Rand Carthon's title was vice president / general manager. And Chad Brinker was president of football operations. The Titans also had a president at the time, who's their CEO, Burke Nihill. So they had president, CEO over here on the business side, president of football over here, general manager over here, but general manager apparently runs the team, and the president of football operations works with and for the general manager, which wasn't what it was. But then Carthon's the one who gets fired, and Carthon was terrible. But I guess what I'm saying is all of this gobbledygook I have never bought into. And the Titans kept telling people last year when they unveiled this structure, they say the job of a general manager in today's NFL is too big for one person, which is really hard for me to understand because, again, all the teams that kick their ass every Sunday have one person as the general manager that runs the football operation. I don't know how they convince the owner this is the right way, but you've worked in the NFL. Have you ever seen this before where there is a football guy, which is what Brinker is, a football guy who is running the organization but is not the general manager, and supposedly the general manager of the Titans does general manager things? Have you ever seen this before? And do you think this actually can work in the NFL? Because I never thought it could work, and I think the dysfunction is a sign of how it doesn't work.
I know he's struggling as a GM, but the former podcaster Michael Lombardi used to have a statement that they never build a monument has never been built for a committee. And, when you look at just the inefficiency of government, it's usually because a lot of people are involved. And why do, private companies have so much more success a lot of times than these government entities that basically have free money through taxes? It's because there are 75 people sitting at a table with different ideas. Yet you go to Amazon, you go to the Philadelphia Eagles, you go, you pick your spot, your business in America. There's usually one decision maker. And one thing you learn early, especially if you get into sales, is like, find out who's making the decision and try to get to at least that's that person's secretary at minimum, right? Because you're wasting time with everyone else. And that's my question mark with the Titans and I think that's happening around the league. I mentioned this before we hopped on. Jeffrey Lurie bought the team, right? 30 years ago. And from Joe Banner to now Howie Roseman and Andy Reid, he entrusted a lot of power into one human being, and they get to make the decisions. But he's also very, I would say, present, involved, but he works hand in hand with that guy, and that they've earned his trust. And I think that goes for a lot of different organizations throughout the league, right? Whether that's, even look at the Lions, the Ford family deserves a lot of credit. They just finally hired the right two people, and those people are making all the decisions in Holmes and Dan Campbell. But when you have these like second, third generation owners that clearly know nothing about football and nothing about running a football business, they could be taken advantage of. And I think you've seen that with the Chicago Bears with Kevin Warren. Doesn't own the team, yet he essentially has as much juice as the owner. He's hiring and firing people. When there are press conferences, he speaks before Ryan Poles. That's always, you go to a 49er press conference, John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan speak, right? You go to a Baltimore Ravens, it's Ozzie Newsome forever, now Eric DeCosta and John Harbaugh. There's no like this other guy. It's like, well, is he the GM? Well, not really, because he can go, well, it's not, I didn't pick the player, but you're the guy at the top. It F's everything up. And listen, I think people really like Chad Brinker because he's a football guy, but like, how does that, he clearly, football can be very political, right? Whether it's assistant coaches trying to work their way up the ladder, through the media, through agents, or whether it's internally in a building, a guy, like you said, comes in a role, and then all of a sudden there's some, grenades going off left and right, and he's the one standing. You're like, how do you think? I mean, he knew what he was getting into. There's a reason he would leave the Packers, right? Is that where he came from?
Yep.
Leave the Packers, where it's harder to do that. That doesn't really, a little more stable place there, to come here. And now he's opening up the press conference when the coach is fired. Like that's a major moment in an NFL franchise. When a head coach is fired, you could argue in season, out of season, whenever the head coach is fired, typically the owner should talk, but whoever talks first, that tells you everything you know who's in charge, because he's in charge.
His name was on the statement in which they fired the coach. And I saw two guys sitting there at the podium, and I want you to go back and watch it, because I saw two dudes sitting there at the podium. Chad Brinker was very, very nervous. He was kind of stumbling over his words. The "where's Amy" cut, he was asked, "Where's Amy?" And he's like, "Oh, what?" Like, he was speaking English, Chad. But there was another one where they asked who was going to pick the coach between him or Borgonzi. And he had to ask the reporter like 3 times what he meant by that, when, again, everybody who speaks English knows it. I actually texted the reporter that asked the question about who was going to pick the coach, and I said, you were about 1 second away from him hitting you with a "no habla inglés," because that was how nervous Brinker was in the press conference, trying to buy time to think about what he's going to say. And Borgonzi looked just completely disinterested up there. And I'm convinced, because Borgonzi's sitting there thinking, why did I even take this job? I was the assistant general manager of the Kansas City Chiefs. And when you get a GM job, you're supposed to pick the team, pick the coach, pick the players, run the organization. Yeah. And I'm not doing any of that. And again, I think this is going to be a problem here.
Well, it definitely is. I'm with you. His face, I think the first thing Borgonzi said is like, these are tough days, and he feels bad. And they like Brian Callahan a lot as a guy. Obviously, it's an awkward moment, because they're probably not lying. I mean, they probably like the human being, but and who knows? Maybe the owner simply said, you have to fire him. Is there a chance that they would have ridden this out all season long, and this is the owner firing him? Because that's what it feels like, right?
Well, I'll tell you why. Because I think Brinker is a political player, and as long as Callahan's there, Callahan's taking the heat. And so now that Callahan's gone, the fan base, I think, has turned their attention to Brinker, and I don't think Brinker likes that. And I do believe that if it was to Brinker, he would have left Callahan out there all year, just so that Callahan would have been the one taking the heat.
I also think, when we talk about, again, $3 million for 99.9% of society is a ton of money, but relative to your profession, how far is Knoxville away from you guys? 2 hours?
4 hours?
4 hours. So when the guy 4 hours away, the college job is what, 3Xing you? What's Hypo making? $9 million?
The guy at Vanderbilt's making the same amount of money.
$3 million at Vanderbilt.
And he's going like 4.
Yeah, and that will, if he has any sort of buzz this offseason, which he clearly is going to have, they're either doubling that or he's going to get 8-9 somewhere, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like the going rate, it's all based. These football coaches don't live it's not like they want to buy 7 beach houses, but it's just about like, this is the going rate, no different in players, right? Like, well, my position pays $22 million. I'm paid 10. I need a $12 million raise. It's all just relative, whether you're making $100,000 and you're like, everyone in my position makes $175,000. Like, I can't work for $100,000.
Sure.
Right. So to me, part of that is who's taking this job. Now, I think we could argue the candidates in this pool. It does feel like there's a better group of candidates for these big college jobs than these NFL. Like, I see Mike McCarthy's name at the top of the list. And honestly, when you start going down, you're like, he's probably the best option to at least get you in the right direction. And this is what I was thinking about Vrabel going to New England. I think New England got pretty lucky that some of these teams were like, I'm the Jets. I'm going all in on getting Mike Vrabel. I don't know if he's, the next Bill Walsh or anything. But he took the Titans to the number 1 seed and won a couple playoff games. Is he flawed? Is he perfect? No, but relative to Aaron Glenn, like most coordinators, Brian Callahan, completely over their head. I know Mike Vrabel, worst case, in a couple years, 9-10 wins, be a wild card. That is we'll throw a parade for that around here. I don't see that guy, like, who's going to the Titans. So they're going to go from $4 million to Ben Johnson last year to be convinced to go to a similar place in Chicago in terms of weird structure, much more historic brand, right? And if you win with the Chicago, it's a bigger deal than if you win with the Titans. But they had to give him $13 million a year. So it's like, the Titans paying that?
$13 million?
That's what he makes. So, and then Dennis Allen's probably not making nothing. I mean, they had to invest in the coaching staff. So the Titans, if you want to just not get the next Dave Canales, who's also making $2 or $3 million, are you going to be serious about payment? That guy also then gets a lot of juice. Well, he's answering to the multiple guys. It's just, that's where, listen, I've been buddies with Matt Nagy for a long time, but like, if you tell me who the next coach of the Titans, I'm probably be like Matt Nagy.
So to me, I think it's right now, my head's kind of 3 guys. And again, there will be some coordinators that pop out and become this year's Ben Johnson or this year's Aaron Glenn or whatever. But to me, I think there are 3 guys, and it's Mike McCarthy, Matt Nagy, and Arthur Smith. If they were to go the route of Chad Brinker, then I would think Mike McCarthy because of the Green Bay connection. Then again, Mike Florio said something to me at the Super Bowl about maybe you learn who you want to work with when you work with somebody, but you also may learn who you don't want to work with. So I don't know where McCarthy and Green Bay kind of left things, but I put McCarthy on the list. Nagy because of Borgonzi. I think that's an obvious tie. Hey, this guy was part of the development of Mahomes. You've got Cam Ward. Matt Nagy was rather successful, I would say, in Chicago. Probably doesn't get enough credit for making the playoffs with Mitch Trubisky as his quarterback.
Was not as bad as the way he gets discussed.
He was 34-31, and he was coach of the year. And it's not his fault the kicker missed the I can go on and on about that.
And his quarterback, Trubisky, is just not a very good football player.
So if Borgonzi's calling the shots, then it would make sense to say, okay, Nagy would be a fit there. And then Arthur Smith, because if it were up to me, if I could just pick, it would be Arthur Smith simply because he was in the organization for a long time. Started at the very bottom and worked his way all the way up to OC, was a very good OC, went to Atlanta, and it wasn't good, but it wasn't like he completely fell on his face in Atlanta. It wasn't like Brian Callahan when they were in Atlanta. And then finally, I think
Desmond Ridder was his quarterback, which if he was the guy choosing, that's a problem too.
I need to know more about the Desmond Ridder thing, why there wasn't a better backup other than Taylor Heineke behind him. But again, Arthur, it's not about Amy, the owner, knowing Arthur, which I do think would help. I think it's more so about Arthur knowing Amy, because the thing about these, and you brought this up, when these teams are passed down, when dad starts the franchise and owns the franchise for 50 years, and dad dies and then hands the franchise off, he's not handing it off to one person. He's usually handing it off to 4 kids and 6 grandkids. And so there's a whole family dynamic here. There are 3 girls that Jim Irsay had that own that team. There's a whole family dynamic here. Arthur already knows the dynamic. So that to me matters. And I know Arthur's a stand-up guy. So that would be the route I would go. But to your point, I don't think that they can take a coach who isn't one of those kind of guys with experience and an understanding that this situation's a little fucked up and you're going to have to suck it up if you want a job.
Well, I'll give you an example. I think before, when I was getting out of the league and transitioning to radio, there was a lot of like Chip Kelly, Greg Schiano, Bill O'Brien was an NFL guy, but he became like kind of a star, really went up another level at Penn State, like winning games with Matt McGloin, right? Well, let's use Lane Kiffin, who's not that far away from you, who's got, family NFL background. Now college and the NFL are pretty similar. He makes $10 million. So or Sark, like even to be like, hey, let's get a young, they're not super young anymore, like him and Sark are 50 years old, but let's young vibe, offensive guy, Sark and Lane, right? Those guys like that. Because I would say historically, 20 years ago, you would talk to a guy like, why would he talk like this? My going rate to leave a job in Florida's willing to give me $80 million over 7 years, whatever the number is. Like, you can't even talk to a guy like that. So really you're getting Arthur Smith, like you said, listen, I've always been impressed. Obviously the family dynamics. He started from fucking nothing inside the organization and worked his way up. Clearly loves football. Like his dad loved business or whatever. So I respect that. But like, who are you? Like, you're just hiring him because you know him, not because like he's going to be like, are a lot of people interviewing him this offseason?
I don't know.
Maybe it takes a couple years.
Coach. I think he's
I do too. I do too. But I think one thing I've always thought about this is the difference, and Nagy's my guy, but Coach Reed on a given day, something could come to his office, whether it's, hey, we need to change this play. He can handle it. Hey, our guy just got a DUI, wrapped his Lamborghini around 3 kids. He can handle it. We just got docked a draft pick because one of our rookies posted something on social media from OTAs. We were too physical. There's nothing he hasn't seen. Nothing. And you go from these positions. Now it helps, right? These guys now have been coached, so he kind of has a feel. But there's a reason some people just can't do that gig. Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, listen, I've had people in my DMs being like, I hear what you're saying about Vrabel, but the last couple of years with Vrabel were bad. And I get it. And he makes some bad hires. Mike Tomlin's a bad example, though they've had down seasons relative to their standards. Harbaugh's a better example. They went through a stretch. Same with Sean Payton in New Orleans, whereas I think they were like 7-9 a couple of years. But it's like, hey, stability. We believe in this guy. And you can say there are personal dynamics. Was Mike not nice to everybody in the building? Like, it's football.
Well, he disrespected the owner. I believe that Vrabel needed to go when it was time for Vrabel to go, because they had let too much toothpaste out of the tube with him. They had given him too much power. They had let him get away with too much. Vrabel needs an owner. Like, Vrabel's not going to Jeffrey Lurie and talking about the owner the way he talked about the owner here. Like, he's not,
which is fair,
the way he acted if the owner is going to come down on him and say, hey, set the tone. And we know the Titans have bad ownership. But once that toothpaste had gotten out of the tube, I believe that it was time for Vrabel to go. And I don't think Vrabel's that good of a coach. And I think that he is
you think he's a little overrated?
I think he's overrated. I think the guy that made the Titans good was Robinson, the general manager. I think John Robinson, J-Rob built the team up. They made the playoffs before Vrabel showed up. He won 61% of his games. He got fired because they missed on 3 first-round picks in a row. The owner got mad about the A.J. Brown trade, even though she was on board with it. And when she got rid of J-Rob, they were 7-5 in first place. They had made the playoffs 3 years in a row, 4 out of 5, and it's all gone to shit since then. Yeah, but that's just me, and I'm the only person on the planet who believes any of that.
Well, I've known J-Rob since I was a GA at Fresno State in 2008. A long time ago, before this, my podcast became the Volumes podcast. I came out to Nashville, and I'm a huge John Robinson guy, and I agree with you. And I don't know the dynamics between those two guys, but like, that was a winning formula, those two guys together. Yeah. And once
what they needed was an owner who basically would say, you two need to figure your shit out. and not an owner that was, okay, I'm mad at you today and I'm mad at you tomorrow. And that's
and the one thing I've always said this, like I do defend owners for going, listen, whether I inherited the team, whether I made my own money, it's my fucking team. And this is not the tech world where you're like a equity investor in this thing. I pay you to coach the team. So whether you respect me or not, like, you better fake it at least, because this $10 million I'm paying you or whatever is still my money and I don't have to pay you that. And it's where the thing I've always defended Robert Kraft. It's like, Bill, you probably need to be. Now, I understand as long as Robert's alive, it's hard for Bill to be nice to the kid, Jonathan. It's like, I don't respect you. But once Robert's gone, like, that guy is the boss now. And no different with Amy or the daughters now with the Irsay family. Like, they're in charge. Jim Harbaugh, never been confirmed, but a lot of people thought that he pointed at Jed York one time in a team meeting, said, this is for grown men only, and you need to leave. And whether that's like specifically true, there were definitely undercurrents of the way he treated. It's like, well, Jed's the boss here. So it's like, and I think it's hard for Vrabel and Jim. I think sometimes when you get like these former players, a lot of ego, a lot of bravado, just badasses from the moment they were 10, 12 years old, they've earned everything they had. Now, God gave them the body, but like Mike Vrabel goes, like, I'm just a working class kid from Ohio, that like everything I've got, I've created. I'm answering to this daughter who never fucking worked a day in her life. And I do understand both sides of the dynamics, but it is what it is. That's where I do think it's always easier to go work for, the patriarch of the family. Where It's like, hey, listen, whether I agree or disagree with them, I respect Arthur Blank. So Arthur Smith could have and remember when they fired Arthur Smith, like, they were very like over the top. We really like the guy. It's just not working out. Like, I don't think there was like a disrespect from a human level, which clearly happens a lot now. Yeah. And I think Jim Harbaugh specifically learned from it, and he's been much better with the Spanos boys. But I think like they're really into football. So it's easy, like they speak the same language, where some of these owners, like, does Amy even like football? Or whoever. I'm just using her as an example. Sure. Like, I think Mark Davis does like football. And that's why people don't hate working for the Raiders. Like, he does care. He will give you whatever resources he has. But there's just like this negativity in the building where it's hard to overcome. You see it with the Jets. You see it with the Dolphins. And now it feels like the Titans have a little bit, even though you're like, well, they got this Packer guy and this Chiefs guy running it. Yeah, the Raiders have Pete Carroll and John Spytek. From Tom Brady to, USC and the Seattle, and they're awful. So it's hard to overcome a building.
It's funny you tell that story about San Francisco. I never heard that, but I used to work with Floyd Reese, the old general manager of the Oilers and Titans. And when he was an assistant coach in San Francisco, and I want to say this was when Pete McCauley was the coach, maybe. And apparently he made a comment in the locker room pointed towards Eddie DeBartolo. And that Floyd walked out, called his wife, and said, go ahead and pack the house up because we're all getting fired. When the head coach is making comments about the owner in front of the owner, that's when it's time to pack it all up. I do want your opinion, John Middlekauff, on Cam. And I think Cam Ward is going to be a bust. And as soon as I say that, Titan fans get all up in arms and they get back. Jared, it's been 6 games. What are you talking about? I believe Cam Ward as a prospect was a good prospect, a first-round graded quarterback. But he wasn't an elite prospect. He wasn't Andrew Luck. He wasn't Joe Burrow. He wasn't Trevor Lawrence. He wasn't that kind of guy. I think the organizational infrastructure, how bad the team is, how bad the coaching is, how bad the owning is, on top of the fact that he's got mechanical flaws that aren't going to get worked out while they're trying to ask him to save the franchise, is going to lead to what I call the cycle of suck. It's what happens in New York. It's what happens in Cleveland. It's what happens in all these places with bad owners and bad teams. You draft a quarterback, you ruin the quarterback. 3 years later, you're drafting again. I just know the organization too well. I'm calling it now. I think Cam's going to be a bust. Do you think that that's fair, given how much I know about this organization, or do you think 6 games in, that's still unfair?
Well, I think his style of play, which is kind of like a Caleb, Russell Wilson kind of run around, make plays, is something that can only work if you have stability in an organization. Like Patrick Mahomes, if you would have put him in a situation like this, it could easily have not looked very good. right? And I think when you see these kind of quote unquote playmaking quarterbacks, Josh Allen's really benefited from just having a pretty normal experience in Buffalo. Same head coach the whole time, same GM the whole time. They've had some coaching movement, but that's football. I do think Cam's, like, you kind of have to build your offense around his skill set. And you're seeing, Ben Johnson, who is a kind of a throwback of like my offense or the highway. Like this, it's my baby. And you are going to fit in or fit out. And him and Caleb, it's been a weird start. And Caleb's much more physically gifted, you would say, than Cam, right? Yeah. Much as strong, but he's just a stronger athlete, bigger
He was
arm.
a much better prospect. Caleb was viewed as a generational talent, and Cam was not.
Well, one went to Incarnate Word, the other had every school in the country wanting him, right? So I think Cam was a mid-round pick until he transferred to Miami. People forget, like, he kind of dabbled. And again, I'm pro Cam Ward. More than me. I know a few people with the Titans who are hot. They like the guy. This was in the offseason before you start playing games. But I think it's just very, very hard to overcome. It's where Nagy and Arthur Smith do make, like, you want a guy with an offensive background, former quarterback, former, guy that can build an offense around a guy's specific skill set. I like him more than you, but most quarterbacks are not Peyton Manning or Andrew Luck that can overcome anything. Most quarterbacks will fail if you fuck up, and there's no question you would bet against the Titans, so you would bet against him. And I would say the same thing for Jackson. I know you like Jackson Dart. You put Jackson Dart in this situation, you would say the same thing, right? He would
I think the Giants may fuck him up too.
Yeah, 100%. It's not like Jackson Dart couldn't overcome this. And when you get a guy that's obviously not even close to good enough like Will Levis, it looks as bad as it has. But Cam Ward clearly is not this bad, right? No. If you give Cam Ward to like Kyle Shanahan or Sean McVay and just a stable offensive infrastructure and just a team, think about this. That stat of all four number one quarterbacks or the last 5 years, all their coaches get fired in the season is pretty insane. He came from, by the time he got to Washington State, it was just kind of a stable operation. It was a good, mid-major. Technically, they were a Pac-12 at the time, but they were basically a mid-major. And then once he goes to Miami, we can nitpick Mario in game. Like, Mario runs a real program. It's like now he comes here, he's got GMs and presidents, and it's like, what is going on? And I disagreed with Caleb's dad of like, we need equity and shit because like, we don't know if you're any good. But like his mindset of like, we better be careful going to the Bears was not wrong.
No, it was not. John Middlekauff hosts the 3 and Out podcast. Go like and subscribe that. And on YouTube, like and subscribe the page as well. Really great stuff covering the NFL. John, thank you so much for your time, bud.
See ya. Take it easy.
Yep. Okay. John Middlekauff joining us on the program here. And I want to thank him for all of that. And by the way, I will just say when it comes to the Cam thing, it's not a Cam thing about why I think Cam is going to bust. It is a Titans thing as to why I think Cam is going to bust. So I saw PK had a report that on Sunday, the Titans are not planning to honor Mike Vrabel. That's right. According to Kuharsky, there will not be a video tribute to the former head coach. And I have to say, I think that's pretty petty, given the fact that Mike Vrabel is immensely popular. And I think it will just add fuel to the fire with how bad Mike Vrabel wants to kick your ass. And I have to ask this question to the Titans, again, who are planning on not honoring their former head coach at the game. Why do you hate Mike Vrabel so much? Is it because he was a dick? Because when you hired Mike Vrabel, you knew he was a dick. You gave him a contract extension. You knew he was a dick. You gave him some, I don't know exactly how much, but with Rand Carthon, you gave him some personnel control. And when you gave him that personnel control, some of it, you knew he was a dick. You broke up with him. He didn't fire you. So while I'm not the biggest Vrabel guy in the world, and if you were to ask me, Jared, what's your problem with Mike Vrabel? I would tell you, I think he was a good coach. I think he gets too much credit for the games they won. I think he doesn't get enough blame for how he handled his coaching staff. I think he is a good head coach, not a great head coach. But that's my problem. I don't have any personal problem with Vrabel. I like Vrabel. But I have to ask, again, you dumped him, not the other way around. Mike Vrabel was a good coach of the Tennessee Titans. I thought his comments in New England were totally out of line, and I think he should have shown Amy more respect. She does own the team after all. And as Floyd used to always tell me, you have to kiss the owner's ass. But come on now. No video tribute? And I told my dad, I said, Ryan Tannehill will be remembered by whomever comes after Ryan Tannehill. So the fact that the quarterbacks have stunk after Ryan Tannehill is going to lead people to believe that, Ryan Tannehill wasn't that bad. If Will Levis was Patrick Mahomes, people would be saying, Tannehill was good, but he wasn't this. Now it's, oh man, we'd kill for Ryan Tannehill around here. And it kind of feels like the Titans are doing what they're doing because their reality has been the exact single worst outcome that could have happened after they fired Mike Vrabel. The only thing better is that Vrabel hasn't won a Super Bowl, at least not yet. But Mike Vrabel was a big part of the Titans. Mike Vrabel was a very successful coach. So to not give Vrabel a video tribute, it feels almost soulless. This organization should show respect to everybody who made the Titans great and gave the Titans success, whether it's Derrick Henry, Ryan Tannehill, John Robinson, Jeff Fisher, Mike Vrabel. And I think that's petty of the Titans. They should have a video tribute for Vrabel. And the fact that they don't have a video tribute for Vrabel is kind of embarrassing. And it goes back to the entire point of the problem, which is they need to start operating as an organization based upon football logic and not impulsive anger. That's going to do it for us today. Thank you, John Middlekauff, for coming on the show. Again, like and subscribe. I know we're now over 3,000 subscribers on YouTube, which is pretty freaking cool, but add more to it. Like and subscribe, and we'll see everybody tomorrow here on the Stillman and Company program. We will be live at 2. And again, what I keep saying is if anything happens, if any news breaks, if anything goes down, we will go live. Take care, everybody.